When I first drove through the winding entrance of Greenleaf Estates, I felt an immediate sense of relief and optimism. Rows of tidy homes, each with beautifully manicured lawns and matching mailboxes, lined the broad, tree-shaded streets. A small pond at the subdivision's center shimmered under the late afternoon sun, and neighbors walked their dogs on wide sidewalks. The real estate agent had promised an orderly, family-friendly neighborhood, just the place I was hoping to settle after bouncing around several rentals. My new house sat at the end of Sycamore Lane, where the developer had planted a row of sycamore trees, each trunk thick and strong. The property itself wasn't huge, but it had a wide backyard, one I hoped to use for gardening. However, the agent warned me that Greenleaf Estates had a strict homeowners association, typically requiring approval for modifications. I shrugged, figuring I'd just abide by the rules. After all, I'd heard stories about HOAs run by someone dubbed Karen, but I assumed those were exaggerations. On move-in day, as I unloaded boxes, a tall, blonde-haired woman with an air of authority strode across the street. Her attire looked business casual for a simple day in the neighborhood: pressed khaki pants, a pastel blouse embroidered with the Greenleaf HOA emblem, and a clipboard tucked under one arm. She introduced herself as Karen Sanderson, the HOA president. "Welcome to Greenleaf Estates," Karen said, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm here to ensure you've received our community guidelines. We pride ourselves on uniformity, trash bins neatly stored, lawns kept to a certain height, and so on." She handed me a thick packet of bylaws, adding in a pointed tone, "We take these seriously." I thanked her, politely acknowledging the rules. She eyed my half-emptied moving truck, but said nothing further, just gave a short nod and moved on. At the time, I thought her abruptness was normal for an overworked HOA leader. Little did I know she'd soon become the biggest obstacle to the community composting initiative we were about to launch. Within weeks, I discovered that Greenleaf Estates had a small community garden near the neighborhood park, an area with raised beds for flowers, herbs, and vegetables, maintained by volunteers. At one of the garden gatherings, I met several neighbors who were passionate about sustainability. They proposed expanding the garden's impact by starting a composting project. The idea: a few large, well-ventilated compost bins where residents could drop off organic waste, kitchen scraps, yard clippings, to create nutrient-rich soil for the community garden and personal gardens. I was excited by this plan. Back in my old rental, I'd practiced small-scale composting. I volunteered to help build or maintain the bins. A neighbor named Darius, a retired engineer, had experience constructing sturdy wooden compost structures. Another neighbor, Tony, had knowledge of organic gardening. Soon, a core group formed, meeting weekly to develop the composting system. A stroke of luck occurred when we applied for a county sustainability grant, which offered funding to neighborhoods pioneering eco-friendly initiatives. We'd submitted a proposal detailing how composting reduces landfill waste, cuts greenhouse gas emissions, and enriches local soil. To our delight, we won a modest grant, enough money to buy top-quality bin materials, plus educational flyers for residents. The county praised our forward-thinking approach to building a greener community. The HOA board initially seemed neutral on the matter. Ms. Patel, a board member, expressed cautious support, saying the garden had been a mild success, so maybe composting would help. Yet we soon realized that Karen Sanderson had not wholeheartedly endorsed the project. She rarely attended the garden subcommittee meetings, and when asked about composting, she made dismissive remarks. "I'm sure it's fine, as long as there's no odor or unsightliness." We took that as a green light, provided we kept things tidy. In early spring, we erected 3 large compost bins at the edge of the community garden, each constructed with sturdy wood frames and wire mesh sides for ventilation. We posted signs explaining what could and couldn't be composted, along with instructions on layering green, wet, and brown, dry, materials. Over 100 residents expressed interest, planning to save kitchen scraps for the bins. The county provided an official plaque reading, "Sustainability Grant Recipient," which we proudly displayed. Everything seemed poised for success. Little did we know how vehemently Karen would oppose the project once she decided it clashed with her vision of a perfect neighborhood. As the compost bins became active, a handful of neighbors regularly dropped off scraps, fruit peels, coffee grounds, vegetable trimmings, leaves, small yard clippings. The bins filled gradually, layered with dry leaves for odor control. Tony and Darius supervised, occasionally turning the piles with a pitchfork to aerate. The project thrived. We noticed minimal odor thanks to correct layering, and the warm weather accelerated decomposition. Within a few months, we'd have fresh compost to enrich the garden. But soon, Karen arrived at the garden one afternoon, clipboard in tow. A neighbor texted me, saying she'd been seen peering into the bins, wrinkling her nose. The next day, Tony reported that Karen confronted her with complaints about unpleasant smells drifting near the playground. Tony tried explaining that compost done properly wouldn't produce strong odors, and the playground was 50 yards away. No one else complained. Karen was unconvinced, muttering about rotten garbage. She demanded the bins be relocated further from common areas. We pointed out the bins were on the designated garden plot, the best site for easy access and for the planned usage in the community garden. Also, our grant proposal specifically placed them there for synergy with the garden. Ms. Patel, the board member, tried to mediate, suggesting we add extra signage or odor reduction measures. We readily agreed. We sprinkled sawdust to absorb moisture, added carbon-heavy materials. Yet Karen still scowled anytime she passed. A few days later, she posted an announcement on the HOA's official forum, concerns about compost odors in common spaces. The text claimed multiple residents found the smell offensive, though we only knew of Karen's complaints. She threatened that if the bins became a nuisance, the board might force their removal. We replied calmly on the forum, clarifying the county-approved nature of the project and the steps we took to minimize odors. Many neighbors chimed in, expressing support, some calling the compost bins a great step towards sustainability. Karen's frustration simmered. We suspected she disliked losing control. The compost initiative had broad resident backing and a county grant, so she couldn't simply veto it. She started to watch us more closely, making random visits to inspect the bins. We complied politely, giving her tours, showing how we layered materials properly. But the tension grew. She clearly hated the concept of decomposing waste in her pristine neighborhood. Still, we never imagined she'd sabotage the project until she did. A few weeks passed. Late spring warmth sped up the composting process. We occasionally found the bin lids ajar in the morning, though we swore we'd left them secured at night. Tony suspected raccoons, so we began using stronger latches. Another time, we found scattered scraps outside the bin, as if someone had rummaged through them. Again, we blamed critters. But soon, more suspicious incidents piled up. One morning, Darius discovered a white residue on the bin's edges, accompanied by an odd chemical smell. He told Tony, who texted me, something weird is on the compost lid, like bleach or cleaning solution. Alarmed, I rushed over. Sure enough, a pungent chlorine-like odor lingered. The top layer of compost had an off smell, not the usual earthy aroma of decomposition. It smelled chemically. We removed that top layer, discarding it just in case, and carefully rinsed the bin's interior. Tony said, I hope no one's intentionally pouring chemicals here. That would ruin the compost and harm the environment. We had no direct proof, but we suspected sabotage. Our first guess was Karen, given her hostility. Yet we couldn't fathom she'd stoop so low as to dump bleach or chemicals. Another neighbor, Janelle, suggested setting up a small camera to catch any meddler. We debated the ethics, but the bin was on common ground, so we decided to ask Ms. Patel for permission to install a discreet trail camera. Ms. Patel agreed, saying if someone was tampering with the bins, we needed evidence. We installed the camera hidden among some tall flowers, aimed at the compost area. Days went by with nothing suspicious, just neighbors dropping scraps. Then, one morning, we checked the camera footage and froze in shock. Around 2 a.m., a lone figure approached, carrying a plastic jug. They lifted the bin lid, poured liquid inside, replaced the lid, and hurried off. The figure's face was partially covered by a hood, but the posture, the build, it strongly resembled Karen. She had that distinctive tall, slender frame. Even the hair shape under the hood looked like her signature bob. We couldn't be absolutely certain, but the suspicion was overwhelming. Tony gasped, "She's pouring something into our compost. That must be bleach or chemicals." We confirmed the top layer again smelled like bleach. Furious, we realized we'd caught her on camera. We lacked a crystal-clear face shot, but the silhouette was telling. Darius suggested we alert the HOA board, show them the footage, and potentially call the county, since our project was partially county-funded. Sabotaging a grant-funded program might carry legal consequences. But we hesitated, wanting more definitive proof. We decided to keep the camera rolling, hoping to catch a clearer shot if she returned. We also installed a second camera from a different angle. Meanwhile, we'd remove the chemically tainted layer, trying to salvage the compost below. Our hearts sank, seeing months of organic waste compromised. This sabotage threatened the entire project. We were also worried about potential environmental damage from bleach seeping into the soil. It was no trivial matter. A few nights later, the saboteur returned. The second camera angle caught a more direct shot. Around midnight, a figure wearing a baseball cap and dark hoodie approached. She raised the bin lid, dumped a jug's contents inside. In the faint glow of a nearby lamppost, the camera captured the saboteur's face for a split second, Karen's unmistakable features. She glanced around nervously, revealing half her face. Then she replaced the lid and hurried away. We had it, undeniable proof that Karen was the vandal. Stunned, we gathered the evidence. The bleach-laced compost was ruined. The strong chemicals killed the beneficial microbes, meaning we'd have to dispose of large portions to avoid contaminating the garden. Beyond the sabotage, it was an environmental hazard. The bins were intended to produce organic fertilizer, but now we had bleach-laden waste. Tony fumed, "This is so reckless. She's harming the soil, the environment, and our entire project's credibility." We debated our next step. We concluded we should inform the HOA board, excluding Karen, present the footage, and also alert the county sustainability office, which had funded our bins. This was bigger than a petty HOA dispute. Karen had effectively undone months of community labor and risked environmental damage. Ms. Patel arranged a closed-door board meeting without Karen's prior knowledge, wanting to see the footage first. When we showed them the video, the board members were shocked and outraged. Mr. Bennett, another board member, exclaimed, "She's the president, for goodness sake, yet she's vandalizing a sanctioned project?" They recognized the severity. Not only did Karen's act breach HOA rules, vandalism, and property damage, but it also threatened the county grant. Ms. Patel said, "We must contact the county. This violates the grant conditions. Karen can't sabotage a project that's recognized by local government." The board prepared to summon an emergency session, leaving Karen out temporarily until they could confirm next steps. Meanwhile, Ms. Patel suggested we contact the county's environmental department. We readily agreed, gathering logs of the sabotage, the camera footage, and records of how much compost was destroyed. The next day, we emailed the county sustainability office, explaining that our compost bins were sabotaged with bleach by an HOA official, and providing photos, video stills, and a summary of the environmental harm. We worried the county might revoke the grant, thinking the neighborhood wasn't serious. But the sustainability officer, Ms. Duran, responded with grave concern. "This is a serious matter," she wrote. "We'll dispatch an investigator to assess the damage and determine if any environmental regulations were violated." By the end of the week, Ms. Duran arrived on site with another county official, Mr. Alvarez, specializing in environmental compliance. They donned gloves and inspected the bins, testing pH levels, checking for bleach residue. They measured the area around the bin, ensuring no runoff contaminated nearby soil or water. After some tests, Ms. Duran frowned, stating, "We do detect a high chlorine presence in the compost. This likely killed all beneficial microbes. If some of this leached into the ground, It could harm plants or beneficial insects. We'll see what the report concludes. She also asked about the suspect. We explained we had camera footage identifying Karen, the HOA president, as the culprit. Ms. Duran's eyes widened. That's outrageous. We'll have to inform our legal department. You're recipients of a county sustainability grant. Deliberately damaging the project could carry financial penalties under the grant contract, plus possible environmental fines. A swirl of relief and anger coursed through me. Relief that the county took it seriously, anger that Karen's sabotage might cost the entire neighborhood if the county withdrew support. Ms. Duran assured us we won't punish the community for one bad actor. We'll hold the individual accountable. Please preserve your footage for official review. We agreed wholeheartedly. Meanwhile, the board prepared to confront Karen at an emergency meeting, with Ms. Patel orchestrating the session. The stage was set for a dramatic clash between Karen and the outraged neighbors. One late afternoon, a notice went out. Emergency HOA meeting. All residents encouraged to attend. The posted agenda was vague, referencing urgent concerns about the composting project and potential vandalism. Word spread quickly that the board was about to expose Karen's sabotage. The small community center was packed with neighbors, including the county investigator Ms. Duran. Karen, oblivious to the organized ambush, sat at the front table, flanked by the other board members. She wore her usual confident expression, though it faltered slightly, sensing the tense atmosphere. Ms. Patel called the meeting to order. After a few formalities, she addressed the main topic. We've received credible reports and evidence that our neighborhood compost bins, funded by a county sustainability grant, have been deliberately tampered with using bleach, resulting in severe damage to the compost. We have video footage identifying the vandal. At that moment, Ms. Patel nodded to Darius, who connected a laptop to a projector. The short clip of Karen pouring bleach played on the screen. Gasps erupted. People strained forward, seeing Karen's face in the dim lighting. An unmistakable hush fell. Karen's eyes widened in horror. She blurted, that could be anyone. It's too dark. I was just checking the bins at night. I didn't pour bleach. This is taken out of context. She fumbled for excuses, but the evidence was clear. A labeled bleach jug in her hand, the distinctive posture, the partial face. Ms. Patel, arms folded, retorted, Karen, we also have additional footage from multiple angles. Not to mention the chemical residue tests. This is beyond dispute. The crowd murmured angrily. Some neighbors shouted, how could you sabotage our community project? Another demanded, why sabotage something that helps everyone? Ms. Duran stepped forward, introduced herself as a county official. She explained the seriousness. Composting is an eco-friendly practice. Pouring bleach is harmful to microorganisms, creating potential pollution. Under our grant terms, willful damage can result in fines and restitution. The county is reviewing these actions as environmental damage. Karen stammered, face flushed red. She tried to deflect. It smelled awful, and children play nearby. I was protecting the neighborhood from disease. I never intended to cause real harm. The crowd jeered. Ms. Patel shook her head. We had no other complaints. The bin was properly maintained. You took it upon yourself to sabotage a communal resource. That's unacceptable. The board announced a formal motion to censure Karen, remove her from HOA presidency, and refer the matter to local authorities for potential legal action. A hush fell. Karen attempted to defend herself, but the wave of outrage was unstoppable. Ms. Wilcox, a board member, demanded, you must repay the cost of replacing contaminated compost and possibly new bins. We can't let this stand. Ms. Duran nodded, adding that the county likely would impose a fine for environmental harm, plus require re-education on composting. Karen sank in her seat, sweat beading on her forehead, her aura of authority shattered. Neighbors who once admired her efficiency now glared, disgusted by her reckless act. The board voted overwhelmingly to remove Karen as president, pending a full membership vote if needed. Many demanded she step down immediately. Tears shone in Karen's eyes, but she mustered a final indignation. You people value rotting garbage more than my concerns." She stormed out as the meeting ended in chaotic applause and angry mutterings. In the following days, the fallout rained down on Karen. The county's official stance was firm. She had violated the spirit, and potentially the letter, of the sustainability grant contract, damaging the compost project intentionally. Ms. Duran informed us that the county's legal team prepared to levy an environmental damage fine against Karen personally. The sum might range from a few hundred to a couple $1,000s, depending on final assessment. They also plan to demand restitution for the cost of replacing the tainted compost material, plus labor costs. Meanwhile, the HOA board filed a formal complaint, referencing their own rules against vandalism of common property, since the compost bins belong to the community. They threatened to sue if Karen refused to pay for new bins or lost materials. Ms. Patel told me that Karen's lawyer tried to argue lack of conclusive identification, but the multiple camera angles sealed her fate. The lawyer pivoted to negotiating a settlement. Ultimately, Karen faced a steep restitution bill to the HOA for new bins, the old ones were thoroughly contaminated, and to the county for the wasted compost. The county also mandated she attend an eco-awareness program, a short course teaching environmental responsibility and the principles behind composting. The irony was rich. Karen, who once poured bleach into the bins, now had to learn how compost fosters beneficial microbes. If she completed that, the county might reduce part of the fine. Nonetheless, the initial sum was in the thousands. She also lost her position as HOA president, with Ms. Patel stepping in as interim. The local news picked up the story in a small blurb. HOA official vandalizes compost bins, faces county fines. Public reaction was swift. Many ridiculed her, some sympathized with the odor complaint, but overall, people found her sabotage inexcusable. Within Greenleaf Estates, her reputation lay in tatters. Former allies distanced themselves, either out of moral outrage or fear of association with a now-disgraced leader. With Karen effectively dethroned, our group resumed the compost project. The old bins were deemed compromised by Bleach, so we built new, improved versions using the remaining grant funds. The county allowed partial reallocation after hearing the story. Volunteers rallied, determined not to let one person's sabotage ruin a beneficial endeavor. Ms. Duran attended a small rebuilding ceremony, praising the community's resilience and reaffirming the county's support. We salvaged what we could of the old compost, mostly the lower layers that tested free of chemicals. The top layers, thoroughly contaminated, were disposed of safely according to county guidelines. We introduced fresh brown materials, leaves, sawdust, to restart the microbial process. Thanks to guidance from Ms. Duran and local extension agents, we overcame the setback. The new bins boasted tighter lids and reinforced structures to deter further tampering. Neighbors who once hesitated about composting now joined wholeheartedly, donating kitchen scraps. Some wrote notes of encouragement on the bin walls, like, "Stay strong, keep composting." The sense of unity soared. Even the children at the local school got involved, with teachers assigning a compost project to teach kids about environmental cycles. In a twist of poetic justice, Karen's sabotage spurred the entire community to double down on sustainability. After her removal from the presidency, Karen maintained a low profile. She rarely attended HOA functions, and when spotted, she hurried by with downcast eyes. Some neighbors recounted run-ins where she tried to defend her actions, claiming the compost was ruining the neighborhood's pristine image, but few sympathized. She was required to pay the county fine, rumored to be around $2,000, and additional restitution to the HOA for new bins and contaminated compost removal, totaling another $1,500. The eco-awareness course mandated by the county began in the following month, forcing Karen to sit through sessions on the importance of microbes, the carbon-nitrogen ratio, and how bleach kills beneficial organisms. Furthermore, the HOA board considered whether to ban her from holding any future office. Ms. Patel believed that level of censure was necessary to protect the community from future sabotage. Many residents agreed. They pointed out that an HOA president who stooped to vandalizing a county-funded project had fundamentally betrayed the trust placed in her. The motion to bar her from future leadership roles passed easily in a membership vote. Local rumors suggested Karen might sell her house and leave Greenleaf Estates, but no immediate listing appeared. Perhaps she felt too humiliated to show her face in the real estate market. Meanwhile, the neighborhood marched on, celebrating a newly supportive board that encouraged not just composting, but also other green initiatives like rain barrels and a pollinator garden. Freed from Karen's oppressive rule, the sense of collective empowerment grew. By midsummer, the new compost bins thrived. The once ruined pile recovered, brimming with the healthy, earthy smell of decomposition. We began harvesting small batches of nutrient-rich compost, spreading it onto the community garden beds. Cucumbers, tomatoes, and peppers flourished. The local children marveled at how kitchen scraps and lawn trimmings transformed into dark, crumbly soil that gave life to plants. Even the county recognized Greenleaf Estates as a success story, awarding us a small extra grant to expand the pollinator-friendly landscaping around the garden. Periodically, Ms. Duran visited to monitor progress. She commended us for persevering after the sabotage. This project represents how community can overcome negativity and come out stronger, she said. I'm proud to see everyone so united. Indeed, the fiasco with Karen had ironically galvanized the entire subdivision. People stepped up, forging stronger bonds and a deeper sense of environmental stewardship. As for Karen, she completed her eco-awareness program. Word was she found it insufferable, forced to learn the exact details of how bleach disrupts compost microbes. She quietly paid her monthly installment on the fines and restitution. The board, under Ms. Patel's leadership, pledged not to ostracize her personally, but made it clear she held no authority. Some neighbors felt pity, but most agreed she needed to face the consequences. The once powerful HOA president now existed as an example of how petty grievances, left unchecked, can lead to destructive extremes. The culminating moment arrived in early autumn, when the community garden produced a bountiful harvest, thanks largely to the revitalized compost. We organized a small harvest festival, inviting neighbors to share dishes made from garden produce. The county officials attended, proud to see their grant money well used. The mood was festive, with kids painting pumpkins, grown-ups tasting salads and soups made from fresh vegetables. Speeches were given, praising the volunteers who built the compost bins and overcame adversity. Karen, conspicuously absent, stayed home despite the open invitation. Some folks wondered if she might appear to apologize publicly. But she didn't. In her stead, Ms. Patel read a prepared statement from the board, thanking residents for sticking together and emphasizing the lesson: we must never let personal biases derail a beneficial, eco-friendly effort. The success of this composting project shows that community spirit can triumph over sabotage. That night, as I strolled home, I reflected on how far we'd come. Months earlier, we'd faced an inconceivable act, someone pouring bleach into a communal compost. Yet from that adversity, we'd bonded. We'd proven the project's worth, garnered county support, and dethroned a meddling HOA president. The final result wasn't just a bin of rich compost, it was a neighborhood awakened to the power of collaboration, resilience, and the environment. We'd learned that Karen might slow us down, but couldn't extinguish our drive to create something positive. In the weeks after the Harvest Festival, Karen's attempts to resume a normal life in Greenleaf Estates faltered. She remained a homeowner, still subject to the HOA she once ruled. Residents largely shunned her, unwilling to forgive the sabotage. Some scolded her openly for risking environmental damage and costing the HOA money. Children whispered that she was the bleach lady, though many parents told them not to spread gossip. Officially, Karen had been punished in multiple ways. Removal from the HOA presidency, she lost her leadership role and was barred from holding future office. Financial penalty, she paid steep restitution costs and fines imposed by the county for environmental damage and the cost of replacing the bins. Mandatory eco-awareness program. She was forced to learn about composting's benefits and the harmful effects of bleach on soil ecology. Public disgrace. Her reputation was wrecked, her name synonymous with reckless sabotage. Neighbors recalled how she once boasted about preserving property values and neighborhood order. Now she was the example of what happens when an HOA official abuses authority and undermines communal efforts. The entire fiasco served as a cautionary tale. People realized that while HOAs can maintain aesthetic standards, they should never obstruct genuine progress or sabotage beneficial projects out of personal dislike. As seasons turned, the compost bins continued to churn out rich soil. The pollinator garden blossomed with bright native flowers, inviting bees and butterflies. The orchard near the back of the community garden yielded its first fruits. A sense of harmony grew, anchored by the knowledge that the entire neighborhood overcame a bizarre act of vandalism to cultivate something meaningful. Occasionally, I'd see Karen at the mailboxes or driving out of the subdivision, eyes down. She avoided conversation, carrying the weight of her tarnished reputation. Yet, in a way, her sabotage inadvertently strengthened the community's resolve. The project she tried to destroy thrived more than ever. The board realigned to champion sustainability, and neighbors recognized the perils of letting one overzealous leader go unchecked. Looking back, it's remarkable how something as humble as compost, rotting vegetable scraps turning into fertile soil, could spark such a dramatic conflict. We discovered that compost, like a community, needs balance and cooperation. A single toxic element, like bleach or a sabotage-minded HOA president, can threaten the whole process. But with vigilance, we removed the poison and nurtured new growth. In the end, Karen faced her punishment, stripped of her presidency, saddled with heavy fines, forced to finance the compost bins she despised, and to complete an eco-awareness program. Her illusions of power crumbled under the weight of the very grant-funded project she tried to ruin. The final outcome underscored that no matter how controlling an HOA Karen might be, a determined, unified community can stand up for what is right and ultimately transform rot into renewal, both literally and metaphorically.